Hey everybody, I am Brady Briggs. Welcome to another episode of the Combat Logic. What's up, guys? Today I want to talk about all the really intriguing matchups coming up in the coming months regarding the UFC, PFL, and Bellator. First off, we're going to start off with UFC because UFC 273 is going on tomorrow night. Let's see. I'm just going to go over all the really good matchups that I'm excited for, and or perhaps you haven't been enlightened, have been signed. So you got Anthony Hernandez is coming back, the guy that submitted Rodolfo Vieira last year. He's coming back. Alexei Oleinik is fighting Jared Vanderaa after Ilir Latifi pulled out again. I really want to see Latifi knock him stiff, but that's upsetting. Mickey Gall is coming back. Aspen Ladd is fighting Raquel Pennington, considering Irene Aldana pulled out. So Pennington is replacing Aldana. Will face Aspen Ladd. Jairzinho Rosenstrike and Marcin Tybura. That's going to be a good fight. Ian Gary, Cage Warriors champion, versus Darian Weeks, who put on a pretty good fight against Brian Barberena in his UFC debut. He was only 5-0 going into that fight, and he actually fought pretty well and went 3 rounds with him. Vince Pichel versus Mark Madsen. That's a good fight. Vince Pichel's only lost twice in his career. Mark Madsen's a silver medalist in wrestling in the Olympics. He hasn't lost at all as a pro. That should be interesting. Both are very good wrestlers. I think I'd argue Madsen's the better wrestler, though. Mackenzie Dern is facing Tisha Torres. That's a good fight. Dern is coming off a loss to Marina Rodriguez, and Torres, I believe, is on a 5-fight win streak after a 4-fight losing streak. Like, her career just took a fucking plummet, and then she's risen back up and gotten better. It's pretty cool to see. Gilbert Burns versus Hamzat Chimaev. We're all super excited for that one. Aljamain Sterling and Peter Yan. Again, it's a rematch that we're all super excited for. It's about time it's finally happening. And then Alexander Volkanovski versus Chan Sung Jung. No, I really wish that they gave this shot to Josh Emmett. Josh Emmett is 37 years old, and he's on an actual win streak. Jung won his last fight. Emmett's won his last 4 fights at 145 pounds. And he, like Jung, is coming off a win over Dan Ige. Like, he beat the same guy. Man, they should have gave it to him. His time, he doesn't have the time that Jung does. Jung is like 34, 35 at this point. But it's unfortunate. But nonetheless, I'm super excited for this matchup. This matchup is absolutely stellar. Like, Chan Sung Jung versus Alex Volkanovski, can you imagine? Like, I love the way Jung throws punches. His boxing is so slick and so crisp. He hits so hard. He's got good kicks to go along with it. And then Alexander Volkanovski, well, one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. So, Jordan Levitt's coming back. I'm excited to see him. Lena Landsberg is facing Pannie Kianzad. Sorry, this is UFC Fight Night 206. Miguel Beza is fighting Andre Fialho. Andre Fialho, if you don't know, if you watched Michel Pereira's last fight, is that guy. He is fighting Miguel Beza. Drakkar Klose is coming back. That should be interesting. Alatang Hae Lee is fighting Kevin Kroom. That should be a good fight. Jesse Ronson and Hoffa Garcia. Chris Barnett's coming back. That really short, fat black guy that's a heavyweight through spinning wheel kicks. He knocked Ben Rothwell out with a spinning wheel kick and punches. Or maybe it wasn't Ben Rothwell. I think it was Jean Belante. I think he got submitted by Rothwell, actually. You have to go back and look, but he's really fun to watch. He's coming back next weekend. Elizu Zaleski dos Santos is coming back. He's fighting Munir Lazez, a kickboxing coach that has a win over Abdul Razak Al Hassan. And then the main event, Vicente Luque versus Bilal Muhammad 2. If you remember this fight, it happened early on in both of their UFC careers. Each of them had only had a couple. I think Bilal Muhammad was 1-0 in the UFC, and Luque was like 1-1 or 2-1 in the UFC. Luque starched him in the first round. Muhammad has gotten seriously good since then. And Luque's only gotten better too. That should be a really interesting rematch. next one, UFC Fight Night 207, is headlined by Amanda Lemos and Jessica Andrade. Normally, I'm not too excited for female fights, but man, this is a good fight. And I'm going to tell you why when we get to it. But prior to that, we got Jordan Wright and Roman Kopylov. We got Tanner Boser versus Alexander Romanov, which should be really interesting because Alexander Romanov is an absolute tank. He is 15-0, and he only has one decision win. 14 of those wins are finishes, and that includes a 4-0 run thus far in the UFC. Marcin Pacino is facing Felipe Lins. Felipe Lins is a PFL champion at heavyweight. He debuted in the UFC at heavyweight and went 0-2 in the division. Now he's dropping down to light heavyweight. Should be interesting. Damir Hadzovic versus Steve Garcia. That's good. I love Hadzovic. He's a good fighter. Dwight Grant is coming back to face Sergey Kondosko. That should be a good fight. Grant Dawson's he fights a lot like Chan Sung Jung, honestly, with his loopy boxing. I think Jung is a little more accurate with his punches, but he fights a lot like him, and he hits hard too. He's very fun to watch. For instance, Luke Rockhold brought Dwight Grant out to train with him for his Chris Weidman fight when he was training for the UFC middleweight championship. He brought Dwight Grant out to train with him when he was only like 1-0 or 2-0, if that speaks to how talented this kid is. He's not a kid anymore. He's in his mid-30s, but Clay Guida is fighting Claudio Puelles, which that's a really good fight because Puelles is the only fighter in UFC history to have more than one knee bar finish. And he's got 2 inside the UFC. He's got 3 overall. And he's got wicked jiu-jitsu, man. He's got a lot of different submissions to go through his record. But his most recent, his last 3 submission wins all come via knee bar. Tyson Pedro is finally coming back. He's facing Ike Villanueva. Ike Villanueva is a heavy-handed boxer. Tyson Pedro, man, I had such high hopes for him. I really did, such high hopes for him. He's such a prodigy. But after he lost to Shogun, honestly, he could have won that fight. It could have been stopped in that first round. And then he blew his wad and got finished early in the 3rd round. That was in December of 2018. He had that made it a 2-fight losing streak, 1-3 in his last 4. And he hasn't fought since then. But he has a win over Khalil Rountree, and he has a win over Paul Craig. Like, Tyson Pedro is a seriously good fighter. He's a really, really skilled talent. Hopefully he gets back on the winning track, man. I'm super excited to see him back. And he is still only 30 years old. Manal Kape is fighting Sumu Dodri. Man, what a wicked fight this is. Manal Kape, we all know he is a really fun to watch elite level striker. He's got decent submissions too. And Sumu Dodri is a really, really good striker too. I'm super excited for this one. Landel Venat is fighting Charles Jourdain, another fight I'm super, super excited for. Both of which are very flashy, fun to watch strikers. And then we got Jessica Andrade and Amanda Lemos. Lemos is ranked at number 10, and Andrade is ranked at number 1 at 125 pounds. But the A side coming into this fight is Amanda Lemos. Her name is first. That means she'll be fighting in the red corner. And Lemos is 11-1 as a pro. She's on a 5-fight win streak. 7 of those 11 wins come via knockout. 2 of her last 3 wins come via knockout. And she is coming off a win over Angela Hill. And she's a 3-time junk fights champion. And then Jessica Andrade is like perhaps the most brutally powerful female fighter we have in the sport. That should be super interesting. I'm very excited for that fight. Andre Fili is coming back at the next event at UFC Fight Night 208. This is going down on April 30th. Jared Gordon is fighting Grant Dawson. That should be a good fight. After getting knocked out by Charles Oliveira, Jared Gordon has gone 3-0, defeating Chris Fishgold, Danny Chavez, and Joe Selecki. That Joe Selecki win was incredibly impressive, dude. Joe Selecki's a tank. He's an absolute prodigy. Chris Fishgold, Cage Warriors champion. Like, he's done super well. After getting knocked out by Charles Oliveira, that made him 1-3 in his last 4. All 3 of those losses were knockouts since won his last 3. Very impressive. And then Grant Dawson, the only time he's looked human in his UFC career was in his last fight against Rick Glenn, the World Series fighting champion. He went to a draw with him. Other than that, he's been nothing but dominant. He fights just like Bryce Mitchell or Colby Covington. He's got that kind of pace. He's a really good wrestler, really good MMA grappler. Super excited for this fight. Krzysztof Jotko is fighting Gerald Mearshart. That's cool because after getting knocked out by Khamzat Chimaev, Mearshart went 3-0 last year, 3 submission wins. Justin Tafa is fighting Jake Collier. I got a lot of high hopes for Justin Tafa. This dude's striking is so good. I'd only really known him for his boxing, but then his last fight, he gets a head kick knockout like 2 minutes into the first round. He's just 5-3 as a pro. He should be 6-2 because that loss to Carlos Felipe, I thought he won it. But nonetheless, all 5 of those wins come via knockout. Jessica Penne is returning. Antonina Shevchenko is returning against Courtney Casey. Darren Elkins is returning against Tristan Connolly. That should be an interesting fight. And then the main event of the evening, 5 rounds between Rob Font and Marlon Vera. Now, Rob Font, though he lost his last fight to Jose Aldo, was coming in to that fight on a 4-fight win streak, having defeated Sergio Pettis, current Bellator bantamweight champion, Ricky Simone, former LFA champion, Marlon Moraes, 6-time World Series of Fighting champion, and Cody Garbrandt, UFC bantamweight champion, that beat the best ever to claim that belt. Okay, and then we have Marlon Vera, who also shares his last loss with Jose Aldo. Before that, his last loss was Song Yadong in a fight we all knew he won. So he's really 8-2 in his last 10, but he should be 9-1 in his last 10, only losing to Jose Aldo. I really have no idea how that fight's going to go, and it really excites me. Right now, we got UFC 274 going down on May 7th. Got the return of Journey Newson. We got Brandon Royval versus Matt Schnell. Man, what a great fight this is. Royval, man, he's one of the most tenacious talents we have. He just gets right in your grill and throws everything. Literally everything. He's not the most powerful kid, but man, his pace is insane. And his grappling is even more insane. And Matt Schnell has a really good ground game himself. His last two of his last 3 wins, rather, come via triangle choke. Got Francisco Trinaldo versus Danny Roberts. This is a really interesting matchup. Trinaldo is one of those guys in the lighter weights that's really learned to defy age. He's 43 years old and still picking up wins in the UFC. He's 4-1 in his last 5. Like, that's super impressive. And honestly, his last loss before that was Alexander Hernandez in a fight we all knew he won. That was in Hernandez's hometown of San Antonio, Texas. So before that, he knocked out Evan Dunham with a body shot. Like, dude, he's still a really good fighter. We got Randy Braun versus Chaos Williams. Man, Chaos Williams has only lost to Michel Pereira in his UFC career. He's 4-1 in the UFC with 3 knockouts. He's coming off a win over Miguel Beza. He knocked him out in the 3rd round. Very impressively, I might add. Like, Miguel Beza is a really, really solid talent. He's got a lot of potential. And then Randy Braun, he's had some hiccups early on, but dude, aside from getting knocked out by Vicente Luque, he's 4-1 in his last 5 with 3 finishes. Macy Chiasson is fighting Norma Dumont. That's a really good fight. Macy Chiasson, Ultimate Fighter winner. Norma Dumont, one of the better featherweights we have, probably the #1 ranked featherweight if we did have rankings. Man, I'm super excited for that because I love Norma. I like Macy too. They both have a lot of potential. Blagoy Ivanov is fighting Marcos Rogerio de Lima, who De Lima is coming off the first 2-fight win streak, actually just the second 2-fight win streak of his UFC career. He won his first 2 fights in the UFC. Since then, it'd been win-loss, win-loss, win-loss for like 10 straight fights. You know, after that, he went 5-5 or 6-6, something like that. But he's coming off a 2-fight win streak right now. And Blagoy Ivanov is coming off a 2-fight losing streak. However, both of those losses are split decisions. He came over to the UFC with a 16-1 record as the PFL heavyweight champion, former World Series of Fighting heavyweight champion. Lost to Junior Dos Santos, beat Ben Rothwell and Tai Tuivasa, and then lost to Derek Lewis and Augusto Sakai, both razor-thin split decisions. For those of you that don't know, not only is Blagoy Ivanov a world champion in MMA, he's also a world champion in combat sambo, and he defeated Fedor Emelianenko to claim that belt, or championship rather, back when Fedor was still undefeated in MMA as well. That was back in like 2008 or 2007. Donald Cerrone's fighting Joe Lozon, and man, it's about time they put these two together. I'll say that because these two have more bonuses in the UFC than anybody in history. Charles Oliveira might rival that, but Donald Cerrone beat Charles Oliveira back in the day. And yeah, dude, these two are just bonus machines. They're finish machines. Neither of them have done that awfully well lately, but dude, Donald Cerrone's a pro kickboxer. He doesn't look the same anymore on the feet. Like, he's he's over the hill at this point, and so is Joe Lozon. But Lozon's always had some underrated boxing, and they're both as good on the ground as you could get. They both have as good of offensive jiu-jitsu as we've seen in the sport. Like, they both have submitted so many talents with so many brilliant submissions. They're both so fun to watch. They're absolute legends. I can't wait to see them clash. Shogun is fighting Obin St. Preux for the second time. Thought any of y'all remember Obin St. Preux knocked him out in under a minute the first time? Should be interesting to see. Michael Chandler is facing Tony Ferguson. Man, what a great fight. Chandler has since lost his last 2 fights after winning his UFC debut against Dan Hooker. And Tony Ferguson is on a 3-fight losing streak after initially going 15-1 in the UFC on a 12-fight win streak. Both lost to Justin Gaethje. Both lost to Charles Oliveira in their last 2 fights. Rose Namajunas is finally rematching Carla Esparza. Like, finally, the UFC gave Carla Esparza her fucking title shot. Finally. It's about time. I was worried that they were going to wait too long to where no one even cared that Carla was on a 5-fight win streak anymore. But after finishing off that 5-fight win streak with a TKO win over Yan Xiaonan, who had not lost in the UFC yet, she was like 4-0 or 5-0 in the UFC at that point. It was really impressive. I was like, she needs the next title shot. She got it. Thank God. And something to be said about that, Rose Namajunas, since fighting Joanna Jędrzejczyk the first time, she fought Jędrzejczyk, won the belt, first round knockout. She defended it via 5-round decision against Joanna in their rematch. She then fought Jessica Andrade, and she was looking better than ever until she got picked up and slammed on her head, lost the belt. She came back and rematched Jessica Andrade a little over a year later, about 14 months later, and won a decision. She then challenged Weili Zhang for the belt, who had beaten Jessica Andrade for the belt. She challenged then champion Weili Zhang and knocked her out with a head kick in the first round, and then defended it via 5-round decision. So each time she won the belt, she did it by a first-round knockout. She then immediately defended the belt via 5-round decision, twice, against 2 of the best strawweights we've ever seen in the sport. And now she fights another familiar face that she's already fought. Her last 6 fights are 3 people: Joanna, Andrade, Zhang. And now she fights Esparza again for the second time. Should be super interesting. And then we got Charles Oliveira and Justin Gaethje. This one should be even more interesting. Like, holy fuck, dude, what a fight. Gaethje is coming off a win over Michael Chandler, and Oliveira is on like a 10-fight win streak at this point. And he just defended his belt against Dustin Poirier after winning it in a vacant title fight against Michael Chandler. Now, Oliveira's last 4 wins: Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier. It's crazy. Like, he's not the same man he used to be. When he used to get hit hard, he would kind of fold up and be like, okay, you got this one. He's not that man anymore. He really changed, and he's really evolved. And it's been so great to see, because I love Charles Oliveira. I absolutely love him. UFC Fight Night 209 going down May 14th. Caitlin Chukagian and Amanda Hebos. That's a good fight. It's the first one that catches my eye. Ryan Spann and Ion Kudelaba, and again, great fight. Davey Grant is fighting Luis Smoka. Nick Maximov versus Andre Petroski. This is going to be a good fight, because the last winner of the Ultimate Fighter is Andre Petroski. And then Nick Maximov, he's one of the better chain wrestlers in the sport, let alone in the middleweight division. He's 2-0 inside the UFC so far, just like Petroski. This should be a really interesting fight. Petroski is also a good wrestler, so I'm interested to see how that goes. Angela Hill is fighting Verna Jandiroba. Should be interesting. Daniel Pineda is returning against Jamal Emmers. Frank Camacho is returning. Man, he hasn't fought in a hot minute. He lost his last 2 fights to Beneil Dariush and Justin James. He hasn't fought since June of 2020. And then we got Jan Blachowicz and Alexander Rakic. It's a really good fight. I feel it makes sense, and I'm glad we get to see it. I kind of wanted to see Jan fight Anthony Smith, but this is a really good fight too. We got him against the last guy to beat Anthony Smith instead. So now I have UFC Fight Night 210 going down May 21st. Sonny Algo Ponzinibbio is facing Michelle Pahea. That's a really good fight. Dusko Tvorkovich and Chidi Njokuani. Njokuani, following in his brother Anthony's footsteps, started out his career with pro kickboxing, went 12-1, then decided to start his MMA career. And though he hasn't done that awfully well lately, he blew us all away with like a 15-second knockout of one of the tougher talents we have in the sport in Andre Barrial in his UFC debut. That was super impressive. Can't wait to see him against someone like Dusko, because Dusko is incredibly talented. Omar Morales and Euros Medish, that's a good fight. Caitlin Vera and Holly Holm, again, that's a good fight. And then Felipe Corrales versus Chase Hooper. It's cool. We got Chase Hooper's next fight. He did take a little bit of time off. Hopefully, he worked on his physique and conditioning a little bit and his striking. And he's facing someone who's coming off a loss to Chris Gutierrez. So that's pretty perfect. UFC Fight Night 211. Joaquin Buckley is returning against a 24-4 opponent. That should be super interesting. Zarok Adashev is facing O'Day Osborne. Now, Adashev is only, I think he's 4-3 as a pro, but he's also 16-3 as a pro kickboxer, and he's probably the best straight kickboxer we have in the flyweight division. And he faces O'Day Osborne, who is kind of a prodigy of sorts. Zaga Zumagulov is facing Jeff Molina, a Fight Night Global Champion, in Zumagulov. That should be interesting. Then the main event, Dan Ige versus Malazar Evloev. Now, Ige came to the UFC and lost a decision to Julio Arce. Following that, he won 6 straight until he lost to Calvin Kattar. Then he knocked out Gavin Tucker in 22 seconds, and he lost his last 2 fights to Chan Sung Jung and Josh Emmett, as I mentioned earlier. And Malazar Evloev is 15-0, still has yet to lose. He's a multiple-time N1 challenge champion. He may win the UFC belt too. Bellator 277 going down April 15th, just next weekend. Rafael Carvalho is coming back. He'll be headlining the prelims against the guy Corey Anderson made his Bellator debut against, and I'm not even going to try to say his name because it's way too long and hard. Tyrell Fortune is coming back. That should be interesting. Got pretty high hopes for him. Timothy Johnson is fighting Linton Vassell. Aaron Pico is coming back. He was supposed to fight Jeremy Kennedy. What the fuck, man? All right, well, Aaron Pico was scheduled to face his first UFC veteran and Jeremy Kennedy, who's been doing very well for himself lately. But I guess Kennedy withdrew, and he was replaced by A.D. Edwards, who's 9-1 as a pro. So this is still a pretty good matchup, I suppose. His last two wins are over a 5-1 and 8-1 opponent. So I guess that's still a good matchup for Pico. Damn, I really wish he was fighting Jeremy Kennedy, though. That really sucks. Damn, that sucks. He was about to have his first UFC veteran on his record. The co-main event is a title fight between Bellator light heavyweight champion Vadim Nemkov, who looks to defend his belt, against Corey Anderson. That should be super interesting. Corey Anderson's been about as dominant as he could be since leaving the UFC, and he left the UFC on a pretty dominant streak too, aside from getting knocked out by Jan Blachowicz. He's the one that ended the Johnny Walker hype train. When people know Anderson as a wrestler, he did that with his striking. AJ McKee is aiming to defend his Bellator featherweight championship against former multi-time featherweight champion Patricio Pitbull Ferreira. That should be interesting because he pretty much knocked him out with a head kick, and then Ferreira woke up in a guillotine. He really finished him twice inside of like 2 minutes, which is crazy because Patricio Ferreira is the best Bellator fighter we've ever seen before. AJ McKee is now 18-0 as a pro. Like, man, who is going to be his equal? We got Bellator 278 going down April 22nd. There aren't too many great fights on this card, but we got Eric Perez coming back. Super excited to see him fight again. Enrique Barzola was expected to face Josh Hill, who is a really, really solid talent. Josh Hill is 21-4. His last loss is to Rafion Stotts. Other than that, his last loss is to Taylor Lapis by a split decision, who is a GMC bantamweight champion, a TKO bantamweight champion. He's 17-3. He also knocked out Nate Maness, who's doing very well in the UFC right now. He just beat Wilson Hayes in his last fight, who was a UFC title challenger. And then other than that, he's only been beat by Marlon Moraes twice. So Josh Hill is a pretty solid talent. And Barzola, after getting out wrestled for a couple rounds, came back and stopped Darian Caldwell, former Bellator bantamweight champion in his last fight in round 3. Man, I was super excited to see him fight Josh Hill. Now he's left without an opponent. It still says to be announced, so They're trying to keep him on the card. I really hope they can. I love Enrique Barzola. He's fucking awesome, man. He's such a nice guy. He's a really good fighter. And Juliana Velasquez, our 12-0 women's flyweight champion, is facing Liz Carmouche, who comes into the fight on a 3-fight win streak. Bellator 279 going down April 23rd. You got Kai Kamaka is returning. He had a pretty short UFC run, but he left an impression on me, and he's done pretty well in Bellator so far. Yancy Medeiros is fighting Emmanuel Sanchez, after his second win over Daniel Weichel, or his second fight with Daniel Weichel, my bad, he lost the first one. Man, he looked damn near unstoppable in that fight. He looked incredible, so incredible, and he's since lost his last 3 straight to Patricio Freire, and his title shot got submitted. That was also the second time he'd fought him. He got submitted pretty early. Then he lost to Mads Burnell and Jeremy Kennedy. Like, man, all the more reason I would love to see Pico fight Jeremy Kennedy. But he's fighting Yancy Medeiros, who lost his last 4 straight en route to a release from the UFC. Goiti Yamauchi is returning. That should be interesting. I love that dude. He's kind of like the Bellator version of Charles Oliveira. Kind of. That should be. I love watching him fight. He's a very, very, very good fighter. Kyoji Horiguchi is fighting Patchy Mix. This is a bantamweight tournament. That should be interesting. Patchy Mix always looks really good. So does Kyoji Horiguchi. Kyoji was absolutely mauling Sergio Pettis in his last fight until he lost, abruptly. Potential knockout of the year last year. William McFarlane, the former flyweight champion, is fighting Justine Kish. Juan Archuleta is fighting Rafion Stotts for the interim championship, as Sergio Pettis was forced to withdraw via injury. Again, should be a really good fight. Juan Archuleta is a 4-division King of the Cage champion. He's a Bellator champion. Not right now, but Rafion Stotts, this dude, man, what a resume. Okay. He is a VFC bantamweight champion. He has wins over Jeff Kern and Rob Emerson, both UFC veterans. He lost to Merab Dvalishvili. Okay, he lost in 15 seconds to him via KO, via spinning back fist. That's the only time he ever lost. He has 18 fights. He's won 17 of them. And he's coming off wins over Keith Lee, Kevin Lee's little brother, Josh Hill, and Magomed Magomedov, which Magomed Magomedov is the only guy to ever really truly beat Peter Yan. And he absolutely mauled him. Rafion did. And then we have a rematch between Chris Cyborg and Ariane Blanco. Now, it sucks we can't get Chris Cyborg better opponents, but Blanco, though she lost her first fight against her, she's a pro boxer, I guess. It is what it is. And then got Bellator 280 going down May 6th. Lorenz Larkin is facing Anthony Adams. That should be a good fight just because Lorenz Larkin is part of it. He left the UFC on a 2-fight win streak, I believe. Yes, he did, over Jorge Masvidal and Neil Magny. He even finished Neil Magny. He left the UFC. Then he got a title shot against Douglas Lima, lost. Then got knocked out by Paul Daly. Since then, he's won his last 5 straight. His last 3 showing him defeat Andrei Koreshkov, former Bellator champion, a wicked striker. Keita Nakamura, UFC veteran, and Rafael Carvalho, Bellator champion. So he has a win over a Bellator welterweight champion, a Bellator middleweight champion, and a UFC veteran that did pretty well in the UFC and everywhere else he's fought in his last 3 fights. He's really coming into his own. Feature fight of the night showcases Soren Bach, who faces Saul Rogers. Now, Saul Rogers went 4-0 on The Ultimate Fighter, okay? He even beat their season's winner, Ryan Hall. I'm sorry. He even beat Ryan Hall in that time, but he falsified some information on his visa and wasn't able to travel to the States for the finale, considering he hasn't fought once in the UFC. Though he probably would have won his season of The Ultimate Fighter. Nonetheless, Soren Bach is a Cage Warriors champion. He comes into the fight with a 15-1 record, and he's actually the last man to defeat Paddy Pimblett. And he did so by 5-round unanimous decision. And the rear naked choke Paddy had locked in on him just 1 minute into that fight makes me think Soren Bach is pretty unsubmittable. Rogers uses his extreme strength and his superior striking, good wrestling, good submissions. He's a very well-rounded talent. Like, I have no idea how this fight is going to go. But if there's something I could say, Soren Bach is very good at simply acquiring W's. Yoel Romero is facing Melvin Manhoef in the next fight. Melvin Manhoef is one of the most vicious strikers the sport has ever seen. He's one of the most vicious strikers kickboxing has ever seen. And Yoel Romero is also one of the most vicious knockout artists we've ever seen. But neither of them have done very well for themselves lately. They've both had a pretty rough patch. Yoel Romero, I'm pretty sure, has lost his last 4 straight. Yeah, he has. He's gone 1-5 in his last 6. Though that defeat to Whitaker, and I don't know. I thought he lost the first Whitaker fight. I thought he definitely won the second one. But in the Paulo Costa fight, razor close, could have went his way. The Israel Adesanya fight was even close. The Phil Davis fight was close in his Bellator debut. He lost a split decision to him. But nonetheless, we have a rematch between Ryan Bader, Bellator heavyweight champion, and Czech Congo in the main event. Now, their first fight ended in a no contest, just like 2-3 minutes into it. So here we are 2 years later. Hopefully these two stay healthy and we get to see it. Bellator 281 going down May 13th. We got Charlie Ward is coming back. Conor McGregor's teammate. That should be interesting. We got Daniel Weichel versus Rob Whiteford. Whiteford, a UFC veteran. Weichel, one of the Bellator staples for a long time now. Paul Daly's fighting Andre Koreshkov on the to open up the main card. And man, what a wicked fight this is. This should be Paul Daly's last fight. He did express interest in retirement following his last fight against Jason Jackson. This will go down in his hometown of London, England. So, and then Koreshkov, man, both of these guys are just such dangerous strikers. I really can't wait to see how this one goes. Lyoto Machida is fighting Fabian Edwards, Leon Edwards' little brother. Now, Fabian started out his career 9-0. He's since lost his last 2 fights. Machida has lost his last 3, following a 4-fight win streak. He left the UFC on a 2-fight win streak over Eric Anders and Vitor Belfort. Came to Bellator, beat Rafael Carvalho, and then Chael Sonnen. He's since lost his last 3 straight to Gegard Mousasi, Phil Davis, and Ryan Bader, all of which are world champions. There's no shame in that. And then the co-main event, we got Douglas Lima versus Jason Jackson. That's a really good fight, perhaps a #1 contender fight. Actually, it's not, because the main event is an interim championship fight. That's really the #1 contender. Logan Storley replaces Yaroslav Amazov to face Michael Page for the interim title. And now Michael Page is 20-1 as a pro. He has avenged his only loss to Douglas Lima, and he comes in on a 6-fight win streak with 4 knockouts in those 6 wins. And then Logan Storley comes in with a record of 13-1, and he's arguably never lost. He only ever lost to Yaroslav Amosov via split decision. He gave Yaroslav everything he could handle in that fight. It was so close. It could have gone either way. It wasn't a robbery. It could have been a draw. It was such a close fight. So we got Logan Storley, who could very well be undefeated, and Michael Page, who's avenged his only loss ever. I really can't wait for that one. That's going to be a good fight. And I really can't wait for Yaroslav to come back either. All right, Bellator 282, going down June 24th. Man, we ain't got much on this one. Magomed Magomedov, they're trying to get him a fight. Brent Primus is coming back against Alexander Shabliy. And then Gegard Mousasi is defending his belt against Johnny Evelyn. No, I'll tell you what, I really wish Anatoly Tolkov was getting that fight. I really wish Anatoly Tolkov was getting that fight. But nonetheless, he faces his second 11-0 opponent. He just knocked out Austin Vanderford in 85 seconds. How does this fight with Evelyn go? Then we go into PFL. PFL 1, going on April 23rd, later this month. We got Omari Akhmedov is coming back. He's fighting Victor Pesta, who is also a UFC veteran. Got Olivier Aubin Mercier fighting Natan Schultz. Natan Schultz, a 2-time PFL champion. Olivier Aubin Mercier has gone 2-0 in PFL so far against Marcin Held and Daryl Horcher. So that should be a really interesting fight. I'm really very much looking forward to. Emiliano Sordi, the light heavyweight champion, he's coming back. Jeremy Stevens makes his promotional debut against Clay Collard. That should be super interesting. Antonio Carlos Jr. is fighting Delon Monte. I don't know who Delon Monte is, but I like Antonio Carlos Jr. And then the main event is between Haush Manfio and Don Madge. Don Madge is a UFC veteran, and he left the UFC after going 2-0 He beat T. Edwards by a head kick, and then he beat Farziem, a pro kickboxer, before coming to the PFL 2 years later, and he won his PFL debut over Nate Williams. He submitted him in the second round. No, Madge comes into the fight on a 7-fight win streak. He's 10-3-1 as a pro. Comes in on a 7-fight win streak. All 3 of those losses are to the same man, and that man was much, much more experienced than him in all 3 encounters. PFL 2 going down April 28th, and this one's a pretty good card. We got Shaman Moraes versus Boston Salmon. That's going to be a really good fight. Both left the UFC on 2-fight losing streaks. We thought that they were going to be really highly touted prospects, and they just couldn't quite cut it. That's going to be a really good fight that I'm really looking forward to. Ali Isliev is fighting UFC veteran Klidson Abreu. Now, Isliev is 9-0, coming off a knockout win over Jared Roshaw to win the heavyweight tournament in 2019, but he hasn't fought since 2019. He didn't come back for the 2021 season, so that should be interesting. Bubba Jenkins, who defeated Lance Palmer last year, fights in the preliminary co-main event. Lance Palmer faces Chris Wade in the preliminary main event. Palmer is a 2-time PFL champion. I believe he went 11-0 through his first 11 fights. Yeah, he went 11-0 in PFL, and then lost his last 2 fights. Went 0-2 last year against Bubba Jenkins, and then the season winner Mavli Kapalaev. Does he rebound, or does he drop 3 straight? I don't know. And then we got PFL 3. This is the last card they have booked so far, and it goes down on May 6th. Let's see. We got Gleason T-Ball returning, who beat Rory McDonald by unanimous decision last year. I have no idea how any of those judges thought he even won a round against Rory, but he's returning. Magomed Karimov is returning in the preliminary main event. Rory McDonald returns against Brett Cooper. Now, Brett Cooper, though he's 28-15 as a pro, think about it. He has wins over UFC veterans like Jason Von Flue and Rory Markham, Sergio Moraes, Dan Kramer, and Kendall Grove. All 5 of those people he knocked out. All 5 of them. Now, they're not the most dangerous people. They're not the best UFC veterans you could have, but like, he finished all of them. And he's a former ACB welterweight champion. He fought Alexander Slamenko for the Bellator middleweight belt way back. Should be interesting. You got Anthony Pettis returning against Miles Price. Anthony Pettis went 0-2 in PFL last year too, to our surprise. He left the UFC on a 2-fight win streak and went 0-2 last year. No, he should have went 1-1 or 1-0-1. That decision against Hayush Manfield wasn't great, but it is what it is. PFL had a lot of questionable calls last year. Ray Cooper III is returning, last year's welterweight winner, against Magomed Ulamedov. And Ulamedov is 11-0 as a pro with 9 knockout wins. So you got 2 knockout artists going at it in the co-main event of PFL 3. That should be super interesting. I love Ray Cooper III. He's so fun to watch. I'm excited to see Magomed for the first time. And then Kayla Harrison faces Marina Makinita in the main event. Now, Makinita is 6-2 as a pro. Obviously, Harrison is expected to win. She is 12-0 as a pro. But Marina is a 6-time world champion in Sambo. But that being said, she's a bantamweight. She's a natural bantamweight like most of Kayla's opponents have been. And, you know, I really want to see Kayla fight somewhere else where she can fight girls that are at least her size. Imagine her in the UFC in the featherweight division. Like, she can make featherweight, because when PFL took their 2020 season off, Harrison went to Invicta and fought at 145 pounds. So she can make that weight. I'd love to see her against Amanda Nunes. I'd love to see her against Norma Dumont, or in Bellator against Chris Cyborg. You know, some of the best. That would be cool. But nonetheless, Yeah, those are all the really, really interesting fights coming up. Which ones are you most excited for? Thank you for watching. Have a good one.